Okay, so get this right. Former One Direction member found dead in Argentina. You wouldn't believe it, but that news has even reached the Faroe Islands.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy, huh? But that's just one thing in this news roundup. Today, we are diving deep into Faroes news, pulling from sources like Kringvarp Faroe, in.fo, and even VP.o, a local paper.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. Think of it as a crash course on what's making headlines in this corner of the world.
And it's a corner grappling with some big questions, right? I
Yeah,
mean, tradition, change, the economy, even celebrity news.
it
It's a
is.
lot.
It really is. And speaking of big news, we have to talk about Håkan Eriksson, who resigned as the coach of the Faroes national football team.
Big news indeed.
It sent shockwaves, and in.fo even talked about reactions from Sweden, so it's making international headlines. What do you think about that? Any surprises?
Well, it's significant, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Ericsson's time as coach was pretty successful for Faroes football. I think Kringvarp Faroe even quoted him calling it, and I'm paraphrasing here, historically good.
I saw that quote.
But on the other hand, the Faroes Football Association, or FSF, has said that recent results just haven't been good enough. A tough situation.
It's got to be tough for the fans, too. It's, like you said, different perspectives, right? The coach is proud, but the association wants results. Makes you wonder what this means for the future of Faroes football. What will they look for in a new leader?
That is the million kroner question. And speaking of kroner, this resignation comes at a time when the Faroes economy is facing challenges too. Both Kringvarp Faroe and VP.O highlighted that. Fish product exports are down significantly,
Oh, significantly.
820 million kroner less, to be exact.
Wow, that's a huge chunk. And fish are a cornerstone of the Faroes economy, so what's behind this downturn?
It's complicated like most economic things, but VP.O called it, and I quote, a perfect storm.
A perfect storm, huh?
Yes. So global prices are up, but the quantity of fish products exported is down. That combination is worrying,
Yeah.
and you can really feel the uncertainty among the Faroes people.
It's like they say, when it rains, it pours. First the national team, now this. How are people coping?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Kringvarp Faroe did a survey, and a surprising number of residents actually support a new tax on empty homes and summer houses.
Wow, really? A tax on empty properties? That's a bold move. Sounds like they're feeling the housing shortage.
Exactly.
Mhm.
VP.fo has been covering it extensively. This potential tax is a direct response to that crisis. It seems like they're willing to consider measures that might have been off the table before.
It really does make you think, what other changes are coming? And what about the upcoming elections?
Yes, the elections. Things always get interesting around election time. In.fo has been following the different parties' platforms, and there's a big contrast emerging.
Give us the rundown. What are the parties focusing on with all this going on?
Well, the center-right Folkeflokkeren Party is pushing what they're calling a family package, right? VP.O highlighted this package is meant to address declining birth rates and immigration. Two big problems.
So they are trying to, in a way, strengthen the islands by strengthening families, a long-term strategy. What about other parties? What's their approach?
VP.O also covered the Mia Flokkeren Party, and they are going in a different direction. Compassion and individual well-being are their focus, even over bureaucratic stuff.
Sounds like quite the philosophical difference. One party focused on the future, the other on the needs of today.
Exactly. And this difference is resonating. It's more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It's about the soul of the Faroe Islands, what matters more.
What matters most? And speaking of what matters, let's switch gears to local news from Klaksvik. In.O recently reported a DUI arrest there.
A sobering reminder that even in a place as beautiful as the Faroe Islands, things aren't always perfect.
That's right. It really does make you think.
Right.
But on a brighter note, there was also some good news from Klaksvik. In.fo mentioned they're building a new technical school.
Yeah, a sign of progress for sure.
Yeah.
VP.fo even had some photographs of the construction. One was a huge crane being brought in. A pretty cool visual, actually.
Wow, talk about building the future. And speaking of the future, any news on the pilot whales? Kringvarp Faroe had an update on the one they tagged, said it was heading south.
It's amazing what technology can do, right? Tracking these creatures, seeing their world. It reminds you that there is a whole other side to the Faroe Islands, a natural world living alongside the people.
Absolutely. The natural world keeps going, even as we deal with our own stuff. Speaking of which, what's happening in the world of sports? We can't talk about the Faroe Islands without mentioning sports.
Definitely not. When we talked about the football team, but In.fo had a piece about Team H71 winning a big handball match in the European Cup.
European Cup. Now, those are some bragging rights. Any other notable sports moments making the news?
Let me see. Oh, VP.fo had an article about the U17 volleyball teams. They had some ups and downs in the NDVZ Championship.
What now?
The NDVZ Championship, it's the North European Volleyball Zonal Association. Brings together teams from England, Scotland, even the Faroe Islands.
So even in volleyball, the Faroe Islands are competing internationally. Wins and losses aside, that's what matters.
Exactly. Oh, and in.fo also mentioned the NM in weightlifting.
The NM in weightlifting. Now, that's not something you hear every day. Tell me more.
Well, they quoted one of the organizers who said, and I quote, "Now we'll get the orchestra to play."
Uh-huh.
It's a cool mix of athleticism and culture.
It really shows that connection between sports and community, which is strong in the Faroe Islands. And that connection, it's not just sports, is it? What about their cultural events, the arts?
Oh, for sure. Kringvarp Faroe said the Landsensavning event would be broadcast live this year.
That's the charity event by the Red Cross, right?
Yep. It shows how generous the islanders are, how strong their sense of community is.
Even with all the stuff they're dealing with, they come together. It's kind of nice to hear. Anything else interesting in the arts?
VP Dog Foe mentioned a new poetry collection, Livsens Faroe, by Victor Alakjuni.
I'll have to check that out.
It's a good reminder that even with economic woes and political debates, creativity is alive and well.
Like a breath of fresh air, it's good to remember that side of things. Which brings us back to some of the heavier stuff we discussed. Remember that international news about Liam Payne from One Direction?
Oh, right. How could I forget?
It reached the Faroe Islands, too.
It did. Both VP.O and In.O had articles about it. Goes to show, even a place as remote as the Faroe Islands is still connected to the rest of the world.
It really does make you think about those connections, something happening on one side of the world affecting a place like the Faroe Islands. It's wild. We really are all connected.
No doubt. And brings us back to that question, how are the Faroe Islands balancing their own identity with these global pressures? They're facing similar problems to other countries, but their solutions. There's a Faroe's way of doing things.
It's like a microcosm, isn't it? You see these big global trends happening on a smaller, more personal level. So what does it all mean for the Faroe Islands? What kind of future are they building?
Well, that's the exciting part, right? It's a crossroads.
Mhm.
Economic issues, social issues, a changing political scene. But there's a strength there, a determination to find their own way.
You can really feel that, even from afar.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives,
Hmm.
We connect with a place like the Faroe Islands in a different way. We're not just skimming the surface. We're getting into the real stuff, the heart of what makes this place tick.
It reminds you that even though we're talking about islands way up north in the Atlantic, they're dealing with things we all deal with, celebrating things we all celebrate. Everyone's trying to find their way.
It's that universal human experience, right? And when we learn about different places, different perspectives, different ways of living, well, it makes our own understanding of the world a little bit bigger.
I like that. Makes your world a little bigger. So to everyone listening, next time you see a news story or have a conversation, maybe even just a random thought, and it reminds you of these islands, these Faroe Islands, take a second, dive a little deeper. You never know what you'll find.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time.